if you're saying, hey, we don't have enough African Americans at Harvard, right? There's not enough of them at Harvard. Okay, based off of what? I need to, what are the metrics? Where we basing this off of? Um, if the reality is that there's not enough because the scores are not high enough in the African American community to get into Harvard, then we can't just say, well, that's it. The scores aren't high enough and we're done. Well, why aren't the scores high enough?
I was saying, like, when it comes to saying like airline pilots, yeah, why would you not want there to be a kind of nice spread of sex and ethnicity across pilots? But you ultimately want to address that problem as far away from the point where someone's been given a job as possible, i.e. if you want a fair and just society, you want to address that through education, you've got to address that through economics, community building, and all of these projects seem pretty impossible unless you've got a belief in some kind of ulterior power, whether you call it God or common sense is up to you. But without some sort of set of principles, it's difficult to think how you would create a just and fair society. Lara, what do you make of DEI, and in particular Lecrae's point about when it comes to institutions of excellence that you would want to address why there might be disproportionate representation of one group or another?
Well, it's interesting that he chose the example of Harvard, right? Because if you look at Harvard, population-wise, there's a disproportionate number of Asians. And so people are now saying, oh, well, you can't have too many Asians at Harvard. We've got to keep it diverse according to some kind of fictional scale that we don't really know what that is. Because you can take, if you have a town in America that's 98% Hispanic, that's considered diverse. If that same town is 98% white, then it's considered an aberration and it has to be, it has to be obliterated and it has to be reordered. And so what exactly defines diversity? Apparently, it's everything that isn't majority white. And I bring this conversation back to the population of the United States of America, which still, in spite of the best efforts of those who apparently seem to despise white people, this country is still roughly 70% white. And when I ask people, what percentage of the American population do you think is African American or Black American? What do you think most people say? Well, people say 30%, 40%, 50%. Well, it's actually more like around 11%. So when you start, I mean, if you were to watch television in the United States today, you could be forgiven for thinking that 80% of American society is Black because there's been this DEI driven, self-flagellation of white people, correction in the society that doesn't reflect the society at all. Now, I don't even like talking in these kind of numbers. I got to tell you, it makes my skin crawl because I grew up in South Africa under apartheid, which was an institutionalized system of racism and injustice. And every part of my body rebels against that. I don't believe in that, and I never will. So I hate that things get broken down in this way. But, all these issues, he's not wrong. Lecrae is not wrong when he says it's not good enough to say, well, the scores aren't high enough. It is true. We should say, why aren't the scores high enough? And okay, why aren't, I live in rural America. Okay, my children go to Fredericksburg High School. They're not walking into Harvard from Fredericksburg High School. How many people do you think make it from rural America, from a high school like we have here, into Yale, Harvard, and so on and so on? They don't. So, I get a little bit, I mean, for me, I get a little bit annoyed because this idea that it's only, inner city schools populated by Black kids where you don't stand a chance. No, that's not true. And I know there's a history behind that, a history of slavery and all the rest of that needs to be factored into the conversation. But, there's a lot of, our school is majority Hispanic American and white American. And most of those kids don't stand a chance in any kind of upper echelon of American society. Now, that doesn't mean they can't work hard, figure things out, and make a decent living for themselves, especially if they have a bit of luck along the way. I'm not whining here, but there is an issue in American schools across the country There is an issue in inner city schools that absolutely has to address. Americans have been in an education crisis for a very long time, and no one's been willing to tackle this right now. That's what is so revolutionary about this moment that we're in as a nation and as a society. Because right now you have a president in the Oval Office who, contrary to the Hollywood information warfare depiction of presidents that crept in over the last few decades, that the president is somehow just this figurehead and an idiot and isn't really running the country, right? That was a psyop. That was shaping the information battlefield to prepare us for the days of Joe Biden, where it doesn't even matter if your president has dementia because the country's being run by other people that you don't apparently see, or and you don't get to hold them accountable. Well, that whole psyop has been trashed, right? It's gone up in flames. Donald Trump took gasoline and he set the whole thing on fire, and they've never forgiven him for it. Because of all, I mean, I'm sure you can point to his faults, but one of them is not, stupidity is not one of them, right? And so what Donald Trump is willing to do is he's willing to get rid of the Department of Education, which, by the way, for all those people who say, oh, good Lord, you can't get rid of that. What about all those people before the 1960s? When there was no Department of Education, they seemed to do just fine. So, I mean, I agree with Lecrae that it isn't good enough to say you just stop here. You do need to get back to the heart of it. I would say unequivocally, nobody wants a pilot who's in the sky because they're female or because they're black or because they're Hispanic or whatever. No, you want people based on merit. And that's never, ever, ever going to change. And as far as DEI goes, all this DEI consultancy nonsense, I would help them pour gasoline on it. I would happily see it all burned to the ground, because there's not a single black community in this country since DEI began that can stand up and say their lives are better because of it. BLM raised, I think from Nike Jordan, $100 million, from Bank of America, $100 million. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Billions and billions and billions of dollars. And not one town, not one city, not one county in the United States of America gets to stand up and say our lives are better because of what BLM did for this black community here. No, it's a big con. And the sooner we get rid of it, the better.
Some coffee is sad. Some coffee is so bad it probably votes Democrat. Some coffee is so bad it probably likes Kamala Harris's poems.
You can smell it.
But 1775 coffee, bold, powerful. It's got more energy than RFK doing push-ups with a whale carcass on his back. Dark roast hits like a scandal they tried to bury but couldn't. Medium roast, smoother than life before inflation made eggs a luxury. And the Vitality Mushroom Blend fuels your mind like you've just realised everything on the news is a distraction. This is the coffee of revolutionaries, free thinkers, and people who refuse to settle for weak coffee or weak leaders. Small farms, small batches, roasted fresh in Miami. Because your coffee should be fresher than the excuses that were coming out of DC. Whole bean, ground, pods, whatever fuels your rebellion, they got it. Go to 1775coffee.com, use the code BRAND, you get 15% off, and start your morning with a coffee that stands for something and won't fall for anything. Oh, and every dollar spent enters you to win a Cybertruck and 30 grand in cash next week. Well, this is a surprise, isn't it? You could get come on, drink this. They wouldn't matter what it tasted of, would it? So get some 1775 down here, support the brand, and get Rumble Premium too. And yet, Neil, in the United Kingdom, we're seeing DEI initiatives given precedence over paying troops. Tell me, where do you stand on it? Particularly as someone who I imagine in your wild and picaresque journey through professions has picked up all sorts of old school liberal views.
I think, Lara's right. I was, Lara, you really came to a point there. In your last few, paragraphs of what you said. I think it's evident that even before the nonsense of the Black Lives Matter hoax, I think it's demonstrable that the civil rights movement, en masse, on balance, was bad news for Black American people. It absolutely didn't make things better. We ended, or you ended up in the US in a situation where, people had been wholesale invited to embrace the whole idea of, victimhood and all of the rest of it. I'm sure I buy into the idea that the civil rights movement was was bad news for the very group of people that it was supposed to benefit. I think that's true. I think DEI is just bollocks, to use a traditional Scottish word. I come back to the idea that everyone knows if you're
Big
in the
bollocks,
sky,
right?
if you're in the sky, my God, let my aircraft be being piloted by the very best human being available for that post. And likewise, let the people in air traffic control on the ground that are speaking to my pilot be absolutely the very best selected human beings there could possibly be. So, and in that context, I don't care. I don't care whether they're, white, black, brown, Jewish, Islam, Christian, whatever. I just want all of that to be being taken care of by the people it has been demonstrated are the very best people technically to get that job done, to get me from A to B. That's all of it. I mean, I really struggle to buy into and debate DEI because it's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I want nothing whatever to do with it. And I think we've been DEI is just one of many ways in which we have been led away from what it is to do the right thing. We all know this. Equity rather than equality is axiomatically wrong.
Marxism.
You don't want to end up in a situation where everyone is the same. That's completely wrong. You want people to demonstrate by their dedication, by their ability, that they are the best people for the relevant tasks. And all of this. I mean, I hope to goodness that Donald Trump's administration in the US, if he is genuinely anti-woke, DEI being a pillar of the woke nonsense, if he genuinely can sweep that away, and it is superficial. By its very nature, it's nonsense. It has no roots. It has no foundation in anything that any of us would take seriously. If we were being honest, it's absolute bollocks. And the sooner we can sign DEI and all of that nonsense to the dustbin of history, the better. It's right to discriminate. We all discriminate all the time. You discriminate with your partner. You've decided that one person out of 8 billion is the only one for you. That's discriminatory, and it's right. And we all do. And society discriminates because you go, right, well, in this context, this very narrow strata of people are appropriate for the job. That's discriminatory, and everybody else is like, don't be ridiculous, go and do something else because your skill set does not enable you to do this. I believe in discrimination. I think it's absolutely right to be as discriminatory as possible on an individual basis and and at the societal level. It's right to do that, to find the right people for the right things.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.